Hello, my dear friends. Imagine the air is thick with a sweet, chalky dust that catches the light in hazy, golden shafts. It smells of wealth, of leisure, of a world so refined it seems almost unreal. You're standing, unseen, in the corner of a Parisian boudoir in the 1770s, and the air is a confection of perfume and power, a carefully crafted fog of violet, jasmine, and powdered orris root. It's a scent designed to enchant, to elevate, to suggest a person so pure they are practically divine. But lean in a little closer. Though on. Just past that intoxicating floral cloud, there's another aroma, something far more fundamental. It's the smell of a human being who hasn't had a proper bath in months. The truth is, if you were actually breathing this air, the cloying perfume mixed with the unwashed reality of the 18th century would probably make your eyes water. You probably wouldn't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is what makes these sleepy explorations possible. Now, let yourself sink into your pillow. Picture that sun-drenched, dusty room. Imagine the soft rustle of silk and the gentle, rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a powder puff. Forget the shocking reality for a moment and just let the glamorous illusion welcome you in. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The central secret, the one upon which this entire glittering world is built, is a lie your nose would have uncovered in an instant. The illusion is one of pristine, ethereal beauty. The reality is that 18th century Paris, even in the gilded rooms of Versailles, was a city of overwhelming smells. And not pleasant ones. With no modern plumbing, the streets were open sewers and the courtyards of palaces were often used as public latrines. People believed that water was dangerous, not just for drinking, but for bathing. To submerge your body in hot water, they thought, was to open your pores and invite in all sorts of diseases, the dreaded miasmas or foul airs they believed carried sickness. So, a person of quality did not bathe in the way we would understand. Cleanliness was an entirely different concept. It was about what was visible and what was smellable. It was about changing your fine linen undergarments daily, as the clean cloth was thought to draw the impurities and sweat out from your body. And it was about perfume. Copious, expensive, all-consuming perfume. And most importantly, it was about powder. This is our theme for tonight. The fine, scented, ubiquitous powder that defined the era. It is the sensory anchor to this entire story. That sweet, chalky dust is not just a cosmetic. It's a technology. It's a statement. It's a weapon. You watch as a duchess sits patiently in her chair. She is a vision of Rococo artistry, her silk gown a cascade of pastel pinks and blues. Her face is a perfect, placid oval of white lead-based paint, with two perfect circles of carmine rouge on her cheeks. But your focus is on her hair, or rather, the towering confection being constructed upon her head. And the coiffure, the artist, is applying the final, crucial touch. He takes up a large, soft puff made of swan's down, dips it into a porcelain bowl filled with a mountain of fine, off-white powder, and begins to pat. A cloud erupts, so thick you can barely see the man's hands. It settles onto the elaborate hairstyle, onto her shoulders, her face, her gown. She has a cone, a sort of paper funnel, held up to her face to keep from inhaling too much of the stuff, but it's a losing battle. The air is snowing. This isn't a light dusting, like a bit of modern dry shampoo. This is a complete whitewashing. The goal is to entirely cover the hair's natural colour, to create a uniform, sculptural, and most importantly, fragrant effect. This powder is often made from fine wheat starch or potato flour, ground to a silky consistency. It's the perfect vehicle for scent. It's been mixed with dried and pulverized flowers, spices and essential oils. The most fashionable scents are floral and delicate rose violet, jasmine, jonquil, or perhaps something a little more exotic like ambergris or musk, which are themselves derived from the secretions of whales and deer, a strange and pungent animal reality hiding within the aristocratic perfume. Scented powder is the great equalizer of smells. It does not just mask body odor, it vanquishes it. It's an act of olfactory warfare. As the day wears on, the powder will absorb the oils from her scalp and the pomade in her hair, and the warmth of her body will release its perfume, creating a personal cloud of fragrance that follows her everywhere. When she enters a room, it's not her dress or her jewels that announce her arrival first. It's this scent. It says, "I am so wealthy I can afford to purchase pounds of this expensive, perfumed dust. I am so clean. I smell only of flowers." But you know the secret. The powder is a beautiful lie. It's a fragrant cover for a world that is, by our standards, deeply unhygienic. Underneath that powdered masterpiece, her scalp is likely itchy and oily. The powder is not a shampoo, it's a mask. It's hiding the grit and grime of daily life. This is the central contrast of the era, an obsessive pursuit of an artificial, aesthetic purity layered directly over a reality of biological messiness. They didn't solve the problem of dirt, they just buried it under a much prettier, better-smelling problem. And as you watch this cloud of fragrant dust settle, you realize it's not just a fashion statement. It's the physical manifestation of a worldview, a belief that one could literally powder over reality, making it whiter, sweeter, and more pleasing to the senses, even if the truth just beneath the surface was anything but. The entire social fabric, it seems, is held together by this fragrant, fragile, and deeply deceptive dust. And your eyes drift from the Duchess, now perfected hair, to the man who created this illusion, this artist of scent and powder, and you begin to wonder about the tools he uses to perform such potent magic. Your attention shifts from the finished, powdered masterpiece to the artist himself, the celebrity coiffeur. He is a picture of elegance, a far cry from the brutish barbers of a generation past. Dressed in a fine silk coat, with lace at his cuffs and a confident, almost theatrical air, he moves with a dancer's grace around the Duchess' chair. He is not a servant, he is a consultant, an arbiter of taste. His hands, which have just created a work of art upon a human head, are delicate and quick. He lays his implements out on a silk cloth as if they were a surgeon's instruments, long-toothed combs of ivory and tortoiseshell, gleaming steel curling tongs with ornate handles, soft brushes, and that magnificent powder puff. To the Duchess and anyone watching, these tools are symbols of his genius, the ones with which he performs his daily magic. They are part of the illusion of effortless, clean, aristocratic beauty. But you, with your privileged, invisible perspective, can see what they cannot. You lean in for a closer look at these celebrated tools, and the fragrant illusion begins to crumble. Let's start with the comb. It is indeed carved from expensive ivory, a creamy white that speaks of luxury. As the coiffure draws it one last time through a section of hair near the nape of the neck, you see the reality. The fine teeth of the comb are clogged with a thick, waxy, greyish paste. It's a compacted mixture of weeks, maybe months, of accumulated pomade, starch powder, sweat, and tiny flecks of skin from the scalps of a dozen other noble clients. The coiffeur doesn't wash his combs. Why would he? Hot water could warp the precious ivory, and the very concept of germ theory is still more than a century away. To him, clean means wiping the visible hair from the teeth and perhaps scraping out the thickest residue with a fingernail or a small blade before placing it back in its velvet-lined case. The tool is not unhygienic, it's simply seasoned. Then your eyes fall upon the curling tongs, the furze frizer, resting near a small, glowing brazier of charcoal brought into the room by a footman. The coiffeur's assistant carefully heats the tongs in the coals, judging the temperature by instinct alone. A moment too long, and they could scorch the hair or burn the client's scalp. The air carries the faint, acrid smell of hot metal and just a hint of singed pomade. As one of the tongs is pulled from the heat, you can see its surface isn't smooth and polished steel. It's coated in a black, carbonized residue. This is the burnt-on accumulation of pomade, hair fragments, and powder from every curl it has ever created. Each time it clamps down on a section of hair, it's searing this old, greasy, carbonized gunk directly onto the fresh hair, baking the filth of the past into the beauty of the present. And the powder puff. That lovely, soft ball of swan's down that looked so luxurious as it delivered its fragrant cloud. Think about it. It's dipped in powder, patted onto an oily, pomade-laden scalp, then dipped back into the main bowl of powder. It moves from head to head, from boudoir to boudoir, all day long. It's never washed. It becomes a dense, slightly greasy repository of every scalp it has ever touched. It is, in modern terms, a petri dish. But in their world, a world obsessed with scent, as long as it still smells of violets and orris root, it is considered perfectly fine. The pleasant perfume clinging to the tools acts as a kind of olfactory disinfectant, convincing the mind that all is clean and well. Why was this acceptable? because their understanding of contamination was entirely different from ours. Sickness, they believed, came from foul-smelling air, from miasmas. An object couldn't make you sick unless it stank of decay or disease. These tools smelled of perfume, the very antidote to miasma. They smelled of the trade, of wealth, of fashion. The greasy build-up on the comb and the carbonized residue on the tongs weren't seen as filth. They were the patina of an expert's tools, the physical evidence of his craft and his popularity. You wouldn't ask a great painter to scrub his palette clean of all paint after every single brushstroke, would you? Residue was proof of his artistry. So, as the coiffeur packs away his grimy, yet fragrant, implements, you see the second layer of this grand deception. The illusion of clean, effortless beauty is constructed using tools that are anything but. Each elegant curl, each perfectly powdered surface, is achieved by pressing and spreading the literal residue of countless others onto the head of the client. It's a shared, communal grime, a secret layer of filth binding the aristocracy together. And as you watch him wipe down a comb clogged with that waxy, pale substance, you can't help but wonder about the stuff itself. What exactly is that greasy pomade that serves as the foundation for the entire, fragrant, powdered edifice? The coiffeur has finished his work. The Duchess hair is a triumph of sculptural form, a pale, powdered mountain range of curls, braids, and swags. It looks light, almost ethereal, as if it were spun from sugar and moonlight. The air in the boudoir still hangs heavy with the scent of the powder, that clean, floral perfume of violets and rose. This is the scent of the finished product, the public-facing fragrance. But your mind is still on the coiffeur's tools, on that greasy residue. You realize that before the first puff of powder was ever applied, there was another, far more fundamental substance at work: the pomade. A maid or pomade is the architectural glue of 18th century hairstyling. It's what gives the hair its texture, its hold, its ability to be molded and sculpted into these impossible shapes. Without it, the hair would be too soft, too flyaway. The powder would have nothing to stick to. It would just slide off. To the ladies of the court, pomade is a luxurious, scented cosmetic. They purchase it in beautiful porcelain or silver pots, and its fragrance is a key part of their personal toilette. The most fashionable pomades are scented with exotic and costly ingredients: tuberose, jasmine, orange blossom, or even the heady, animalic notes of musk and ambergris. It is, to them, another layer of perfume, a fragrant foundation for the fragrant powder. It is part of the beautiful illusion. Now, let's pull back the curtain on that illusion. You follow the scent, not of the perfume, but of the pomade's base ingredient. To do that, we must leave the gilded boudoir and travel to a much grummier part of the city, to a tallow chandler's workshop or the back room of a butcher's shop. The air here is thick with a different smell. It's the smell of rendered animal fat. The shocking reality is that this luxurious, perfumed pomade is made from lard, pig fat, or sometimes beef or mutton tallow, or if you were particularly wealthy, bear grease, which was thought to be especially good for promoting hair growth. The process is simple and stomach-turning. Animal fat is chopped up, heated in a great, bubbling cauldron until it melts and the impurities and solids are skimmed off the top. The resulting liquid, once it cools and hardens, is a pale, waxy substance. This is the base of your pomade. This is the greasy secret being smeared into the hair of the most fashionable women in Europe. Of course, it doesn't smell of the barnyard by the time it reaches the Duchess dressing table. It has been painstakingly purified and processed. It is washed, clarified, and then infused with perfumes in a process called enfleurage. Fresh flower petals are layered onto trays of the fat, and over days or weeks, the fat absorbs their essential oils. The spent petals are replaced with fresh ones over and over, until the fat is saturated with the desired fragrance. Here's the problem with animal fat: it goes rancid, especially in a world without refrigeration. The expensive perfume is in a constant battle with the natural tendency of the lard to spoil. On a warm day, or after several days of being worn on a warm scalp, underneath a heavy wig and layers of insulating powder, the pomade could begin to turn. A faint, sour, piggy smell would begin to bloom beneath the layers of jasmine and rose. The very substance meant to create an aura of divine fragrance could betray its user, subtly souring on her head. The Duchess might catch a faint, unpleasant whiff as she turns her head, a ghostly reminder of the barnyard clinging to her aristocratic hairdo. This is why the powder was so crucial. The constant reapplication of fresh, scented powder wasn't just for looks, it was an ongoing chemical and olfactory battle against the slow decay happening on your own head. The powder absorbed the excess oils and, more importantly, its powerful perfume masked the developing rancidity of the pomade base. It was a cycle of cosmetic warfare. You apply a perfumed animal fat to your hair to make it sculptable, and then you apply a perfumed powder to the fat to hide the fact that it's starting to smell like old meat. This bizarre reality was perfectly acceptable because of their worldview. There was no concept of synthetic, petroleum-based products like the gels and hairsprays we use today. What else would they use? Animal fat was a readily available, effective, and perfectly natural material. It was malleable, it held scent well, and it worked. The fact that it was, fundamentally, pig lard was not seen as gross in the way we would think of it. It was simply a raw material, one that was transformed by the perfumer's art into a luxury good. Transubstantiation from foul-smelling fat to fragrant pomade was a testament to human ingenuity and the power of perfume. The glamour wasn't in the base ingredient, it was in the costly and difficult process of purifying and scenting it. They weren't hiding the fact that it was fat, they were celebrating their ability to conquer its unpleasant nature and bend it to the will of fashion. So as you picture the Duchess in her carriage, her powdered hair a perfect white, you now know the secret that she herself is trying to ignore. Her head is a battlefield of scents. The delicate, aristocratic florals are fighting a desperate rear-guard action against the inevitable, creeping reality of rancid lard. And this intimate, fragrant, and slightly sour space around her head, this personal atmosphere created by her coiffure, holds more than just secrets of hygiene. In a court society built on whispers and observation, the man who gets this close, who literally has his hands in the greasy, powdered secrets of the nobility, is in a position to hear everything. You are back in the boudoir. The air is still hazy with that fine, floral powder. The coiffure, having finished with the Duchess, is now attending to her younger sister, the Viscountess. He moves with a quiet intimacy, his body close to hers, his hands working deftly in her hair. He murmurs suggestions, anecdotes, and compliments. The atmosphere is relaxed, conspiratorial. The ladies made flits in and out, but for long stretches, the coiffure and the Viscountess are in their own little world, a bubble of shared concentration and scent. To the outside observer, this is merely a service being performed, an artist at his craft. He is creating beauty, preparing the lady for a day of social engagements, a ball, or a trip to the opera. The hairdresser is a fixture of the daily routine, as commonplace as a cup of morning chocolate. The public image is one of pure, aesthetic focus. But you, listening closely, can detect the true nature of their conversation. The real commodity being exchanged here is not hairstyling, it's information. The shocking reality is that the celebrity coiffeur is one of the most effective and valuable intelligence brokers in all of Paris. His role grants him a level of intimate access that spies and diplomats could only dream of. Think of the setting. The boudoir is a lady's private sanctuary. It is where she reads her letters, entertains her closest friends, and speaks her mind away from the rigid formalities of the public court. She is often in a state of undress, her guard down, and into this space comes the coiffeur. For 1, 2, sometimes 3 hours, he is a constant, quiet presence. His work is meticulous and requires his client to sit still. What else is there to do but talk? The conversation starts with the polite fiction of discussing the hairstyle itself. Shall we try the News La Belle Poule style? Madame. A tribute to the naval victory, you know. But it quickly drifts. As his hands work the rancid, scented pomade through her hair, he might mention, "I was with the Duchess de Polignac this morning. She is so distraught. Husband, the Duke, has lost a fortune at the card table again." He delivers this bombshell with the same gentle tone he uses to suggest the placement of a curl. He is not gossiping, he is sharing a concern, a tidbit of news. The Viscountess, in turn, feels compelled to offer something in return. It's a natural human impulse. "Oh, the poor dear," she might sigh, before adding, "Well, that explains why the king refused the Duke's request for that new military appointment." And just like that, a vital piece of political intelligence has been exchanged. The coiffeur files it away. His power comes from his unique position as a neutral party who services everyone. In a single day, he might attend to a dozen women from rival court factions, He sees the king's official mistress in the morning and a rising political challenger's wife in the afternoon. To each, he brings the scented dust of gossip from the last. He isn't loyal to any single faction, he is loyal to his own business, and his business thrives on his reputation as someone who is in the know. He becomes a human newspaper, a walking, talking gazette of secrets. He knows who is having an affair, who is in debt, who is falling out of royal favour, and who is pregnant before their husband is even aware. Why was this system tolerated? For the simple reason that everyone benefited from it. For the ladies of the court, the coiffure was a crucial source of information in a world where news travelled slowly and unreliably. Knowing that a rival is financially ruined could give you a critical social advantage. Knowing about a new royal favourite could help you align your family with the rising power. The hairdresser wasn't just doing their hair, he was preparing them for the social battlefield of the day. He was an essential part of their strategic team. Furthermore, the very intimacy of his work created a strange, unspoken bond. He saw them without their powdered masks on, literally and figuratively. He knew the colour of their natural hair, the shape of their head, the little blemishes on their scalp. This physical intimacy fostered a psychological one. Sharing a secret with your coiffure felt safe, like whispering into the void. But of course, it wasn't. So when you see the famous coiffeur Leonard Orty leaning in close to Queen Marie Antoinette, his hands a blur of powdered motion as he constructs one of her legendary, towering hairdos, you must understand what you are witnessing. This is not just a hairstylist and his queen. This is a spy master and his most powerful source. The secrets whispered in that perfumed, powdered air could influence ministerial appointments, military strategies and the fate of nations. Powdered wig, in essence, became a listening device. And the man who powdered it became one of the most secretly powerful men in France, his influence built not on land or title, but on the ephemeral and priceless currency of secrets all gathered under the fragrant cover of his trade. And the very architecture of these hairstyles, the massive structures he built, seemed designed to hold as many secrets as they did horsehair pads. You now understand the political weight and the fragrant secrets held within the boudoir. But let's turn our attention to the physical object itself, the hairstyle. You gaze upon the finished product, a towering creation known as a puff. It rises a full 2 or 3 feet above the lady's head. It's a marvel of engineering, a seemingly weightless cloud of powdered hair, decorated with feathers, ribbons, and even model ships or miniature gardens. It appears effortless, an organic extension of the wearer's own natural grace and style. It is the ultimate illusion of Rococo lightness, a playful, whimsical sculpture that seems to defy gravity. This is the glamorous image, the one immortalized in portraits by artists like Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun. A cloud of hair as light as a powdered dream. Now, let's dismantle it. Let's look beneath the powdered surface and see the shocking reality of its construction. The puff is a lie. It's not really hair in the way we think of it. A woman's natural hair, even if long and thick, would never be enough to create such a colossal structure. The puff is, in fact, a carefully constructed piece of architecture, and the woman's head is merely the foundation upon which it is built. The process begins not with a brush, but with a wire frame. The coiffeur, acting more like an engineer than a stylist, selects a cage-like structure made of thin, flexible wire. This forms the basic shape and height of the puff. It's the scaffolding. Next come the pads. These are crescent-shaped or sausage-like cushions made of wool, cloth, or, most commonly, horsehair, are sometimes called cousins or, more bluntly, rats. These pads are pinned directly to the woman's scalp and to the wire frame, building up the necessary bulk and volume. They are the bricks and mortar of the hairdo. The coiffeur, then, begins the filthy part of the job. He takes the pomade that's scented, slowly souring animal fat we discussed and smears it liberally all over the pads and the wire frame. This creates a sticky, greasy surface. He also works a generous amount of this pomade through the woman's own natural hair. The goal is to make everything tacky and pliable. His hands are slick with the stuff. Now, he begins to integrate the woman's hair with the structure. He pulls her own pomaded locks up and over the pads, trying to disguise the underlying framework. But it's never enough. So, he reaches for his supply of false hair. Long switches of human hair, often of a different colour and texture, are purchased to supplement the volume. He works these in, plastering them onto the greasy pads, blending them with the client's real hair. The entire structure a combination of her hair, horsehair pads, and locks of hair from perhaps a dozen different strangesses moulded and shaped around the wire frame. He secures it all with an arsenal of long, sharp hairpins, sometimes dozens of them, stabbed deep into the pads and through the wire. The woman can likely feel the points of these pins pressing against her scalp. Finally, once this complex, heavy, greasy, multi-species structure is complete, the great cover-up begins. The coiffure blankets the entire thing in that fine, scented powder. The powder's job is not just to smell good, but to create a uniform color, hiding the seams between the real hair, the false hair, and the horsehair pads. It's a coat of monochromatic paint that turns a chaotic construction project into what appears to be a seamless sculpture. So why endure this? Why sit for hours while a man builds a sticky, heavy, and deeply uncomfortable cage on your head? The why lies in the relentless logic of competitive display. In the court of Versailles, status was everything, and it had to be visible. A towering palf was a clear and unambiguous signal of wealth and status. It demonstrated that you had the leisure time to sit for hours to have it created, the money to pay a top coiffure like Leonard or Ligris de Rumini, and the funds to purchase the vast quantities of pomade, powder, and false hair required. It was a form of conspicuous consumption worn directly on your head. Furthermore, it physically embodied the Rococo aesthetic of artifice. The goal was not to look natural. The goal was to look like a work of art, to transcend nature. An impossibly tall, perfectly powdered hairstyle was a testament to human ingenuity and its ability to shape and improve upon the raw materials of the body. It was a rejection of the mundane. The discomfort, the weight, the sheer absurdity of it was part of the point. It was a physical burden that proved you belonged to a class that did not need to perform physical labor. It was a beautiful, powdered prison of status. And as you imagine the lady now trying to navigate a doorway without knocking her grand structure askew, you realize the discomfort is only just beginning. You may have to wear this elaborate, pomade-smeared cage for days or even weeks before her next appointment. And in the warm, dark, greasy crevices of that masterpiece, other things might soon begin to build their homes. The palf is complete. The Duchess is a walking masterpiece, the envy of the court. She moves through the gilded halls of Versailles, her head held high partly out of pride and partly out of necessity to keep the 3-foot structure balanced. In the candlelight of a grand ball, the powder on her hair glitters, the silken ribbons and jewels woven into it sparkle, and the whole effect is one of astonishing, almost divine, artifice. She is the pinnacle of fashion, a perfect, fragrant, powdered sculpture. This is the illusion, a woman so refined, so clean, so elevated above the common muck of the world that even her hair is a perfect work of art. But now, let's follow her home. The ball ends, and she returns to her apartments. What happens next? The shocking reality is that this elaborate construction is not taken down. To do so would be to destroy hours of the coiffeur's expensive work. It would be unthinkable to dismantle it after only one evening. And so, the Duchess must go to bed with it. These hairstyles were designed to last, not for a day, but for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes even longer. The pomade and powder would be refreshed daily, but the underlying structure remained in place. So, you watch as she prepares for sleep. Her maids remove her gown and jewels, but the hair remains. It is now a fixture. She cannot simply lie down on a pillow. She must sleep sitting up or propped against a pile of cushions, her neck resting in a special crescent-shaped support to keep the hairdo from being crushed. Sleep is a nightly ordeal of stiffness and discomfort. But the discomfort is the least of her problems. Let's consider what the palf is made of. It is a warm, dark, and sheltered environment. It is constructed from a wire cage, horsehair pads, and human hair, all slathered in a nutrient-rich, edible substance, animal fat pomade. And on top of that, it's been dusted with a fine coating of another edible substance, wheat or potato flour. She has, in essence, constructed a perfect, baited, and furnished habitat on her head. And it does not take long for new tenants to arrive. The most common and unwelcome residents were lice. Head lice were a fact of life for rich and poor alike, but these elaborate hairstyles were a paradise for them. They had endless places to hide, lay their eggs and feed. But it wasn't just lice. The rancid pomade and flour could attract other vermin. It was not unheard of for women to discover fleas, mites, and even more disturbingly, mice nesting in their hair. A mouse, seeking warmth and a source of food, could easily scurry up the back of a chair while a lady was dozing, find its way into the complex labyrinth of the path and decide to make a home there. Imagine the horror of waking in the night to the faint sound of scratching or movement coming from your own hair. To combat this infestation, the ladies of the aristocracy had special tools. Long, elegant scratching sticks, often made of ivory or silver and shaped like a delicate hand, were a boudoir essential. They were used to poke down into the hairdo to relieve an itch without disturbing the elaborate styling. These were called gratte-dos or back scratchers, but their primary use was for the scalp. For a more serious infestation, a lady might try to fumigate her hair by placing a cage over it and burning sulfur or other chemicals inside, hoping the noxious fumes would kill the pests. Some even designed small, baited traps that could be discreetly placed within the coiffure at night. So, why on earth would anyone tolerate this? Why live with a literal nest on your head? The historical logic returns to their understanding of cleanliness and the body. Vermin like lice were an accepted, if unpleasant, part of life. They were not seen as a sign of being dirty in the moral or social sense, just an unfortunate nuisance. The presence of lice did not carry the same social stigma it does today. It was a shared problem across all classes. The primary focus of hygiene was on smell and appearance. As long as the puff looked perfect and smelled of perfume and powder, what was happening inside its hidden architecture was a private matter, to be managed with your scratching stick and a stiff upper lip. The glamour of the powdered surface was a deliberate act of denial against the grim biological reality it concealed. It was a triumph of aesthetics over biology. Duchess at the ball, looking like a goddess, might be privately aware of the persistent itch on her scalp, a tiny secret ecosystem thriving just inches from her brain. The why is that the social imperative to display status through fashion was far more powerful than the personal discomfort or the presence of pests. It was better to be fashionable and infested than to be plain and pest-free. The beautiful illusion of the pristine coiffure was worth the itchy, crawling, and sometimes scurrying reality that lay beneath. And while the vermin were a biological threat, you realize the very powder used to create this illusion carried its own, more insidious danger. Your focus now narrows from the grand structure of the puff to the very substance that gives it its iconic, ethereal appearance, the powder. You see it everywhere in the aristocratic world. It's puffed into hair, dusted onto shoulders, and even applied to the face to create that desirable matte white complexion. The air in every fashionable salon, ballroom, and boudoir is thick with it. It is the colour of nobility, the scent of leisure. The public illusion is one of purity and delicacy. This fine, white, fragrant dust seems as harmless as snow, a cosmetic veil that transforms a mere mortal into a porcelain figure. It is the ultimate symbol of a life untouched by the sun, by labour, by the grime of the common world. But now, as you watch a coiffure liberally puffing this cloud onto a client, let's consider what this powder is actually made of. Let's look inside the porcelain bowl and examine the glittering white dust. The shocking reality is that this harmless cosmetic could be a slow-acting poison. The most common and safest hair powders were, as we've established, made from finely milled starches wheat, potato, or rice flour. These were relatively benign, though breathing in any fine particulate matter in large quantities is never ideal. But these starches, especially wheat, were a foodstuff. During times of famine or high bread prices, which were frequent in 18th century France, the conspicuous use of edible flour to whiten one's hair was an act of profound political arrogance. While the poor starved in the streets, the aristocracy were literally pouring food onto their heads for the sake of fashion. This alone created enormous resentment. But the danger went far beyond the political. To achieve a more brilliant, long-lasting and starkly white finish, cosmeticians and coiffeurs often mixed other substances into their powders. Some of these were simply strange, like pulverized alabaster or the dried and powdered bones of cuttlefish. But the most prized ingredient for achieving a truly fashionable pallor was lead. White lead ceruse, as it was known, had been used in cosmetics since ancient Rome. It was a pigment prized by artists for its opacity and brightness, and those same qualities made it highly desirable for makeup and hair powder. When ground into a fine dust and mixed with starch, it gave the hair a uniquely brilliant, almost luminous whiteness that simple flour could not replicate. It was the high-definition version of hair powder, and the wealthy paid a premium for it. Of course, we now know that lead is a potent neurotoxin. But in the 18th century, the link between the powder and its ill effects was not clearly understood. The symptoms of lead poisoning are slow, cumulative, and insidious. A lady using a lead-based powder on her hair and face would gradually absorb the poison through her skin, scalp, and lungs. The initial signs might be dismissed as other ailments: chronic headaches, stomach pains, tremors, and a peculiar metallic taste in the mouth. Over time, it could lead to severe neurological damage, paralysis, and death. It also caused hair to fall out, creating a vicious cycle where a woman would use more and more of the leaded powder and false hair to cover the very bald patches the powder was creating. Imagine the coiffeur standing in a perpetual cloud of this dust all day, every day. He breathes it in, it coats his hands, it gets in his food. These artists of beauty were slowly poisoning themselves and their clients. The very tools of their trade were toxic. The pursuit of a fashionable, deathly pallor could, quite literally, lead to death. But why was this incredibly dangerous substance used so freely? The why is rooted in a combination of ignorance and the powerful allure of aesthetic ideals. The medical understanding of toxicology was in its infancy. While some doctors made a connection between lead cosmetics and certain ailments, their warnings were often dismissed. The symptoms were so gradual and varied that they were easily attributed to other causes: a nervous disposition, bad humors, or a delicate constitution. More importantly, the aesthetic ideal of whiteness was paramount. A pale, powdered face and hair were the ultimate signifiers of class. It proved you did not work in the sun. It suggested a delicate, ethereal nature free from the sweaty, ruddy realities of physical existence. The whiteness was a visual shorthand for purity, leisure, and power. The risk of some vague future illness was a small price to pay for the immediate and undeniable social capital that this perfect, lead-induced whiteness provided. It was a gamble on beauty, a dangerous wager for status. As you watch the coiffeur create another blindingly white masterpiece, you see the tragic irony. In their quest to create an image of perfect, timeless, aristocratic health and purity, they were using a substance that corroded the body from within. The beautiful, powdered illusion of life was built upon a foundation of slow, creeping death. The entire glittering world of the Rococo elite was held together by a fragrant, fashionable, and deeply toxic dust. And the men who wielded this dust, who climbed from humble beginnings to the height of this dangerous world, were on a perilous journey of their own. You see him now, the master coiffeur, not in the gilded boudoir of a duchess, but years earlier, in his past. You picture him as a young man, a boy, in the back of a grimy barber shop in a crowded Parisian neighborhood. The air here isn't perfumed with violets and jasmine, it smells of stale beer, unwashed bodies, and the sharp tang of cheap soap. This is the world of the barbier perruquier, the barber wigmaker. Here, the work isn't about creating whimsical art. It's about the rough and tumble trades of shaving grizzled chins, pulling rotten teeth, and performing minor surgeries like bloodletting. And of course making and dressing the sturdy, sensible wigs worn by merchants, lawyers, and clerks. The image is one of a humble, even brutish, manual trade, a world away from the perfumed artistry of the royal court. But this young apprentice has a talent. His hands are quicker, his eye for style more astute. He doesn't just want to dress the sensible wigs of the bourgeoisie, he dreams of sculpting the powdered crowns of the aristocracy. He is ambitious. And so begins the treacherous climb from the back alley to the royal boudoir. The shocking reality of this journey is that it was a social climb almost unheard of at the time. The rigid class structure of ancient regime France was designed to keep people in their place. A baker's son became a baker. A nobleman's son became a nobleman. For a man from a common background, a man who worked with his hands, to gain not just wealth but fame and intimate access to the highest echelons of society was revolutionary. The celebrity coiffeur was a new kind of man, a prototype of the modern celebrity artist, and his rise was both dazzling and deeply resented. Our young apprentice would first have to distinguish himself. Perhaps he creates a slightly more elegant buckle on a lawyer's wig, or finds a way to make a merchant's toupee look more natural. He saves his money, buys better tools, and starts using a slightly more refined, scented powder. He begins to build a reputation, not just as a competent craftsman, but as an artist. He stops pulling teeth and focuses solely on hair. He adopts a new title, rejecting the clumsy barbier perruquier for the elegant and modern coiffeur. His big break might come when a lady-in-waiting to a minor aristocrat notices his work on her husband's wig and impulsively asks if he can do something with her hair for a party. This is his chance. He doesn't give her a simple, modest style. He creates something daring, something taller, more whimsical than she's ever had before. He uses the best scented pomade and the finest powder he can afford. She is a sensation at the party. Other women want to know, who did your hair? Suddenly, he is in demand. He moves from the back alley shop to a small, elegant salon of his own. He raises his prices. He starts to dress in finer clothes, to speak more elegantly, to carry himself not as a tradesman, but as a professor of style. He is selling not just a hairstyle, but an experience, a transformation. The logic of his success was in understanding that he was not in the hair business. He was in the status business. The aristocratic women who hired him weren't just paying for a puff. They were paying for the confidence that came with knowing they were wearing the very latest, most fashionable creation by the city's most talked-about artist. Men like Leonard Ortai, the legendary coiffeur to Marie Antoinette, became fabulously wealthy and famous. Leonard, a provincial boy from the south of France, ended up with his own chateau and a theatre he founded, the Cour de Monsieur. He was a household name, a veritable superstar. But this success came at a price. The traditional aristocracy looked down on these upstart hairdressers. They were seen as presumptuous, as commoners who had forgotten their place. Wealth was new money, their fame unseemly. They were courted for their skills, but often mocked behind their backs. They had to navigate a social minefield, always maintaining a delicate balance between artistic confidence and humble deference. A single misstep, a perceived insolence, could mean instant ruin. The why behind their unprecedented rise is twofold. First, the aristocracy of the late 18th century was increasingly decadent and obsessed with novelty. They were bored. A brilliant, charismatic coiffeur who could offer them a new diversion, a new sensation, was a welcome distraction. They were willing to overlook his humble origins for the sake of the amusement and status he provided. Second, and more importantly, the coiffeur was providing an essential service that no one else could. In an era of competitive display, he was the ultimate weapon. He was the architect of their public image. His scented skills were indispensable. So, as you see him now, a star in his own right, bowing gracefully to the Duchess, you understand the incredible journey he has undertaken. He has climbed out of the bloody, soapy water of the barber shop and into the perfumed, powdered clouds of the boudoir. He has transformed himself just as he transforms his clients. He has used hair and scented powder as his ladder, climbing a social structure that was designed to be unscalable. And his art, these towering hairstyles, were not just frivolous decorations. They were becoming a powerful new medium for communication, a way to broadcast opinions on the grandest stage of all. You are no longer in the quiet, conspiratorial boudoir. Instead, you find yourself amidst the crush and glitter of a magnificent ball at the Palace of Versailles. Hundreds of aristocrats are gathered, a sea of silk, jewels and powdered heads. From a distance, the hairstyles of the ladies seem to blend into a uniform landscape of towering, white creations. They are beautiful, impressive, but seemingly just variations on a theme of extravagant height. This is the glamorous illusion, a room full of people whose primary concern is aesthetic beauty, whose heads are adorned with frivolous, meaningless, if lovely, decorations. But you move closer. You begin to look at the details of the puffs, and you realize you are not looking at random assortments of ribbons and feathers. The shocking reality is that these hairstyles are talking. They are elaborate, three-dimensional, scented political cartoons. In an era of strict censorship, where an openly critical pamphlet could land you in the Bastille, the puff had become a surprisingly potent and relatively safe medium for expressing public opinion, celebrating national triumphs, and even satirizing the powerful. You focus on one woman, the Comtesse de Matignon. The hair is arranged in a towering style known as the puff, La Belle Poule. Woven into the powdered curls is a breathtakingly detailed miniature replica of a French frigate, complete with tiny masts, rigging, and silk sails. This isn't just a random nautical theme. The Belle Poule was a real ship, famous for its recent and celebrated victory over a British vessel. By wearing this hairstyle, the Comtesse is not just being fashionable, she is making a bold, patriotic statement. She is wearing her politics on her head. The scent of her powder, perhaps a specially commissioned blend with a salty, marine note of ambergris, completes the multisensory message. The hair is a walking, talking, smelling billboard for French naval supremacy. Your eyes drift to another lady nearby. Her hair is arranged into a pastoral scene. A miniature sheep made of wool, a tiny silk ribbon stream, a little shepherd and shepherdess, and even a spinning water wheel. This is the parfum La Circonstance, a hairstyle that could be adapted to comment on any current event. This particular one, with its rustic theme, is a nod to Queen Marie Antoinette's fantasy farm at the Petit Trianon, the Hameau de la Reine. But what is the tone here? Is it a sincere tribute to the Queen's charmingly simple tastes? Or is it a subtle satire, a gentle mockery of a queen who plays at being a milkmaid while the country's finances crumble? The ambiguity is the point. It allows for plausible deniability. Satire, Your Majesty? Heavens no. It is a tribute to your idyllic grace. You see other, more pointed examples. A hairstyle called the puff inoculation became wildly popular after the king, Louis XV, was successfully inoculated against smallpox. Women wore hairdos featuring a rising sun representing the king and a serpent representing the vanquished disease coiled around a club of Asclepius, the god of medicine. It was a piece of public health propaganda worn as a fashion accessory. When Benjamin Franklin visited Paris as the American ambassador, his fame and charm created a craze for the coiffure La Franklin, a simpler, less ostentatious style meant to mimic his own unpowdered hair and fur cap, signaling support for the American Revolution and its Republican ideals. Why did this bizarre form of communication emerge? The why is deeply tied to the nature of court life and the limitations on speech. Direct political commentary was dangerous, but fashion was a woman's domain, and therefore seen as more frivolous, less threatening. A hairstyle was a transient thing, a playful fancy. It allowed women, who were formerly excluded from political power, to participate in the national conversation. They could signal their allegiances, spread news and express dissent in a coded, symbolic language that was visible to everyone but difficult to prosecute. The celebrity coiffeurs were the ghostwriters of these silent editorials. A client would come to them not just with a request for a beautiful hairdo, but with an idea to be expressed. Honored, Marie Antoinette might say, the Emperor of Austria is visiting. I want something that says Habsburg Alliance, but also French fashion leads the world. And the coiffure will have to translate that complex political message into the language of curls, pads, powder, and props. They became political consultants as much as artists, their scented pomades and powders the ink with which they wrote the headlines of the day. So, as you pan across the ballroom, you no longer see a collection of silly hairdos. You see a vibrant, silent, and scented debate. Each head is a statement, a miniature theatrical production commenting on battles, philosophy, court scandals, and scientific breakthroughs. It is a testament to human creativity and the irrepressible need to communicate, even when voices are silenced. The powdered head was not an empty vessel. It was a stage. And the decision to allow a man into the private space where this stage was set was a source of its own simmering, fragrant scandal. Let's return to the intimate space of the boudoir. You watch as a celebrated male coiffeur, perhaps the famous Ligres de Rumini, puts the finishing touches on a marquise's hair. He leans in close, his face just inches from hers, as he adjusts a delicate silk flower. His hands, powdered and perfumed, move with confident expertise through her hair. The lady herself sits in a state of relaxed intimacy, wearing a loose-fitting dressing gown called a peignoir. The air is warm and smells of scented pomade, powder, and the lady's own personal perfume. Through our modern eyes, the scene might look like a simple, professional service. The illusion is one of artistic collaboration, a trusted expert and his valued client. But in the context of 18th century France, this scene is electric with scandal. The shocking reality is that the rise of the male hairdresser, the coiffeur, was seen by many as a sign of moral decay, a dangerous breach of social and sexual propriety. For centuries, a respectable woman's hair was dressed either by herself, her personal maid, or a female hairdresser coiffeuse. To allow a man and a commoner at that into the private space of the bedroom or dressing room, to have him touch her, to be with him in a state of undress, was deeply controversial. Moralists, pamphleteers, and social critics were outraged. They wrote scathing articles and sermons decrying this new trend. They painted a lurid picture of what they imagined was happening in these boudoirs. The coiffeur was depicted as a seductive predator, a painted insect who used his perfumed powders and flattering words to corrupt the virtue of the nation's noblewomen. His job was described as a pretext for caresses, his hands impudent and sacrilegious. The boudoir, they argued, had been turned into a place of licentious intrigue, and the coiffeur was the serpent in this fashionable Garden of Eden. The husbands of these aristocratic ladies were often a source of anxiety and ridicule. Satirical cartoons depicted them as cuckolds, blissfully unaware as the handsome hairdresser flirted with their wives right under their noses. The coiffeurs perceived effeminacy as delicate hands. His focus on beauty, his often flamboyant dress only added another layer to the scandal. He was seen as a morally ambiguous figure, a third sex who blurred the proper lines between male and female, artisan and aristocrat. He was an agent of chaos in a society built on rigid distinctions. So why, in the face of such widespread condemnation, did the male coiffure not only survive but thrive, eventually eclipsing the coiffures entirely? The why is a powerful mix of artistic ambition, social catchit, and the undeniable logic of skill. First, the male coiffeurs were simply more ambitious and better organized. They were the ones who pushed the boundaries of the art form, inventing the towering and complex puffs that women so desired. They framed their work not as a humble craft, but as a liberal art, like painting or sculpture. Men like Ligros de Rumigny wrote manifestos, published books of hairstyles like his L'Art de la Coiffure des Dames Franoises, and founded academies to teach their techniques. They successfully rebranded hairstyling as a form of male genius, and society ladies wanted a genius, not a maid, to do their hair. Second, hiring a famous male coiffeur became a status symbol in itself. It was a sign that you were modern, daring, and wealthy enough to afford the very best. The frisson of scandal was part of the appeal. To have Leonard or Ligros attend to you was to show that you were at the absolute cutting edge of fashion, a trendsetter who was above the petty moralizing of the stuffy old guard. The risk was part of the thrill. Finally, there was a strange kind of safety in the hairdresser's ambiguous social status. He was not an equal. An affair with a duke or a count could lead to ruinous social and political consequences. But the hairdresser, he was, for all his fame, still a commoner, a tradesman. The intimacy was contained within a professional and financial transaction. The relationship was inherently unequal, which, paradoxically, made the physical closeness feel safer and more permissible to some. He was a tame man, a neutered figure allowed into the private chambers precisely because he wasn't a real threat to the social order. So, the scandal was both real and a carefully managed performance. The moralists raged, but the boudoir door remained open. The coiffeur's perfumed, powdered presence was a testament to the fact that, in the 18th century, fashion trumped morality. The desire to have the most magnificent, politically expressive, and artistically daring hairstyle was more powerful than the fear of scandal. And to create these magnificent styles, the coiffeurs needed vast quantities of their most essential raw material, hair. But as you watch him expertly weave a long, glossy switch into the Marquise's coiffure, you might begin to wonder where, exactly, that extra hair came from. The coiffeur reaches into his velvet-lined case and pulls out a long, lustrous switch of hair. It's a beautiful thing, thick and glossy, the color of warm chestnut. It cascades through his fingers like a silken ribbon. He'll use this to add volume and length to his client's puff, blending it seamlessly with her own locks. The illusion presented to the aristocratic client is that this is a luxury good, ethically sourced and carefully selected, just like the fine silk of her gown or the pearls at her neck. It is simply false hair, a commodity available for purchase, its origins as unexamined as the origins of the sugar in her bowl. It's an elegant and necessary component of high fashion. But let's follow that beautiful switch of hair backward in time. Let's uncover the grim, unspoken secret of its origins. The shocking reality is that the booming market for false hair was supplied by a dark and desperate trade, sourcing its raw material from the bodies of the poor, the imprisoned, and even the dead. The demand for hair was insatiable. Every towering puff required multiple switches and pads. An entire industry, largely invisible to the wealthy clientele, sprang up to meet this demand. Hair harvests were a common sight in rural villages. A travelling hair merchant, often working on commission for a Parisian wig maker, would arrive in a poor town and offer to buy hair directly from the heads of the young women. For a peasant girl, whose family might be on the brink of starvation, the offer was a devil's bargain. A few coins, enough to buy bread for a week, in exchange for her crowning glory. Artists of the period depicted these scenes with a sense of pathos, young women weeping as their long braids are shorn off by an unsentimental merchant. The beautiful chestnut switch being woven into the Marquise's hair might well be the product of a teenage girl's desperate sacrifice. Prisons and convents were another major source. Women entering a convent were their heads shorn as a sign of renouncing worldly vanity. This hair was often collected and sold. Likewise, female prisoners, especially those condemned to long sentences or transportation, would have their hair cut off, both as a measure of hygiene and as a form of degradation. This prison crop was then sold to the wig makers. Hair integrated into a glittering court hairstyle could have come from a woman convicted of theft, shivering in a cold cell in the Saltire hospital prison. But the darkest source of all was the battlefield and the morgue. After a battle, scavengers would sometimes move among the dead, shearing the long hair from fallen soldiers before their burial. Similarly, the bodies of the indigent who died in city hospitals and morgues were also harvested for their hair before being dumped into a common grave. While less desirable, as the quality could be poor, it was a source that was grimly reliable. The most beautiful and prized hair, however, was virgin hair from young, healthy women, which fueled the trade in the countryside. So why was this practice, which seems so macabre to us, perfectly acceptable? The why lies in the stark class divisions and the objectification of the bodies of the poor. To the wealthy aristocrat, a peasant girl was not a peer. Her body and its products, whether it was her labour in the fields or the hair on her head, were seen as resources to be used. The transaction was viewed as a fair one. The girl needed money, the coiffeur needed hair. The emotional or social significance of her hair was of little concern. It was a raw material, a commodity. Furthermore, their understanding of the body and identity was different. Once the hair was cut from the head, it was no longer seen as intimately connected to the person who grew it. It was just stuff. It could be cleaned, processed, boiled, and powdered until its human origins were almost entirely erased. The coiffeur himself was the agent of this transformation. He took this raw material, sourced from desperation and death, and through his perfumed, powdered art, he turned it into a symbol of life, luxury, and status. It was the ultimate act of Rococo alchemy, transforming the grim reality of poverty into the glittering illusion of wealth. So, when you see the coiffeur working, you must now see him not just as an artist, but as the final link in a long and often brutal supply chain. You see the ghosts of the people whose bodies supplied his trade. The glossy switch of hair he holds is not just hair. It is the story of a village girl's poverty, a prisoner's shame, a dead soldier's fate. It is being plastered onto a wire frame with rancid pomade, powdered with lead-laced dust, and worn as a party decoration. This entire glittering enterprise is built on a foundation of hidden suffering and exploitation. And yet, the men who presided over this trade, the great coiffeurs, were not content to be seen as mere merchants of this grim harvest. They had grander ambitions. They wanted to be seen as true artists, as intellectuals. You are standing in the elegant, newly opened salon of a master coiffeur on the Rue Saint-Honor, the most fashionable street in Paris. The walls are lined with mirrors, the chairs are upholstered in velvet, and on a marble-topped table there lies a handsome, leather-bound book. The book is open to a page displaying a series of intricate engravings. These are not portraits or landscapes. They are hairstyles, depicted with the precision and artistry of architectural drawings. Each one has a fanciful name: the sentimental, the shepherdess of the Alps, the indiscreet. This is the salon of a man like Ligres de Rumigny or the celebrated and Dulces, men who were not content to be mere tradesmen. The glamorous illusion they cultivated was not just for their clients, but for themselves and for posterity. They sought to elevate their profession from a manual craft to a respected and codified art on par with painting, sculpture, or architecture. The book is the centerpiece of this effort. It's a manifesto, a style guide, a portfolio, and a blatant piece of self-promotion all in one. But let's look closer at the reality of this quest for legitimacy. The shocking truth is that this ambition was seen by most of the established intellectual and artistic world as completely absurd. The idea of a professor of coiffure or an academy of hairstyling was a subject of widespread mockery. These hairdressers were trying to crash a party to which they had not been invited, and the intellectual gatekeepers of Paris were not amused. Consider Ligres de Rumigny's seminal work, L'Art de la Coiffure des Dames Franoises, published in 1765. In his introduction, he makes a bold and almost desperate plea for his art to be taken seriously. He compares the coiffeur to a general arranging his troops, an architect designing a building, a poet composing a verse. He argues that the hairdresser must have a deep understanding of proportion, physiognomy, and aesthetics. He lays out complex systems and principles for his art, treating the human head as a canvas with its own unique challenges. This was a radical act. He was attempting to create a formal, intellectual framework for a practice that had always been learned through apprenticeship and passed down by hand. The The response from the literary and artistic establishment was largely one of scorn. They saw it as the height of pretension. How could this commoner, this man who works with grease and foul-smelling hair from peasants, dare to compare himself to a great painter or a member of the French Academy? Satirists had a field day, writing mock odes to the art of the curling tongue and creating farcical plays about hairdressers who pontificate on aesthetics while secretly dealing with an outbreak of lice in a client's mouth. The coiffeurs were accused of having their brains in their fingers, of being skilled with their hands but empty in their heads. Why did they persist in this seemingly doomed quest for artistic legitimacy? The why is rooted in a deep human desire for respect and a savvy understanding of marketing. On a personal level, these were proud and ambitious men. They knew they were more than just barbers. They possessed a unique and highly sought-after talent that gave them unprecedented access to power and wealth. They genuinely believed in the artistry of their work and chafed at the social condescension they faced. They wanted the respect they felt their genius deserved. On a practical level, it was brilliant marketing. By publishing books and founding academies, they transformed their public image. They were no longer just men you hired to do your hair. They were authors, theorists, and headmasters. You weren't just getting a hairstyle, you were getting a consultation with a master, a living embodiment of the principles laid out in his famous book. This intellectual packaging allowed them to charge even more astronomical fees and further distinguished them from their less ambitious rivals. It was a way of creating a brand. The Academy of Coiffure that Leonard Orty established was less a formal school and more a glorified salon and machine, but it worked wonders for his prestige. The most successful coiffeurs even began to absorb the language and postures of the intellectuals who mocked them. They would hold forth on the philosophy of the curl or the metaphysics of the puff. They named their creations after popular operas and philosophical concepts. It was a performance of intellectualism. They were essentially saying, if you will not grant us entry into your club, we will simply create our own, with its own rules, its own publications, and its own vocabulary. So as you watch the coiffeur in his salon, proudly showing his book of engravings to a potential client, you see the full picture. You see the collision of high ambition and social reality. He is an artist fighting for recognition, a brilliant marketer creating a personal brand, and a tradesman who knows the grim secrets of where his raw materials come from. He is a man who can discourse on the neoclassical principles of proportion one moment and discreetly hand his client a silver scratching stick the next. This quest for legitimacy was another layer of illusion, a fragrant, powdered cloak of intellectualism thrown over the messy, greasy, and often brutal reality of his trade. And the ultimate test of his client's dedication to his art came not at the ball, but at the end of the day, when they had to face the powdered nightmare of going to bed. The moon is high over Paris. The city sounds are muted, the distant clatter of a carriage on cobblestones, the chime of a church bell marking the late hour. You are inside the bedchamber of an aristocratic lady. The candles have been snuffed, save for one flickering taper by her bedside, casting long, dancing shadows on the silk-panelled walls. The ball is over. The guests are gone. Now comes the private ordeal. The glamorous illusion of the evening was one of elegant comfort, of a woman so at ease in her own skin that she could balance a 3-foot sculpture on her head without a care in the world. She laughed, she danced, she flirted, all while appearing as comfortable as if she were wearing a simple bonnet. Now, you witness the shocking reality of her night. Going to bed with a full puff in place is a form of soft torture, a powdered and pomaded prison for the head. Her maid has helped her out of her gown and into a simple nightdress, but the coiffure is untouchable. It looms over her in the dim light, a heavy, alien structure. Her first challenge is simply getting into bed. As we touched on before, she cannot lie down. To do so would be to crush the delicate architecture of wire, horsehair, and her own hair. The hours of work and the vast expense would be ruined. So, she must sleep sitting mostly upright. Her bed is piled high with a mountain of bolsters and pillows, arranged to support her back. The head, however, can't rest against them. She uses a special device, a crescent-shaped stand or a padded brace to cradle her neck, leaving the hairdo to jut out into the empty space behind her. It's an awkward, unnatural posture, more like a patient recovering from a neck injury than a person settling down for a restful sleep. She tries to find a comfortable position, but it's impossible. The sheer weight of the coiffure is a constant, dull ache at the base of her skull. The dozens of long, sharp pins that hold the structure together dig into her scalp. Every time she shifts, one of them seems to find a new and more sensitive spot. And then, there is the itch. An inescapable, maddening itch. It could be from the stale pomade, the irritating powder, or, as she fears, the stirring of the tiny vermin we spoke of earlier. She reaches for her silver gratte-d'os, the elegant scratching stick, and carefully navigates it through the powdered maze, searching for relief. But the relief is fleeting, and the stick can't reach the deepest recesses of the itch. And the smell. Remember that the pomade is made of animal fat. After a long evening in a warm, crowded ballroom, the heat of her own body has been slowly cooking it. The floral perfume of the powder is still there, but now it's mingled with the faint, sour, greasy scent of rancid lard. She is trying to sleep inside a cloud of stale perfume and spoiling fat. The scent that was a symbol of her status just hours ago has become a sickly, cloying presence in the intimacy of her bed. To protect the hairdo from dust and the risk of a mouse's nocturnal exploration, her maid sometimes drapes a fine silk bag or a wire cage known as a calash over the entire structure, turning her head into a small, personal tent. It's claustrophobic and hot. She does this fitfully, waking every hour or so as her neck cramps or a pin digs in. Sleep is not a release, but a state of weary vigilance. This is her reality for days, even weeks at a time. So why? Why would anyone choose to live this way? The why is the most powerful force in this entire story. The tyranny of fashion. In the competitive world of the French court, to appear with a crushed or less than perfect hairstyle would be a social disaster. It would signal that you either couldn't afford to have it regularly maintained, or that you lacked the fortitude and discipline to preserve it. The discomfort was a badge of honor. It was the price of beauty, the cost of status. Enduring the powdered nightmare of the night was a testament to one's commitment to the cause of high fashion. It was a form of aristocratic asceticism, a martyrdom for the sake of appearances. This nightly suffering was the hidden cost of the glamorous illusion. The Duchess, who seemed so effortlessly chic at the ball, was paying for it with sleepless nights, an aching neck, an itchy scalp, and the constant, low-grade misery of being trapped inside her own hairstyle. The beautiful powdered cloud was, in reality, a cage. And as the years of the 1780s wore on, the political climate in France was beginning to shift dramatically. The scented, powdered world of the aristocracy, with all its extravagant and uncomfortable absurdities, was on a collision course with a brutal new reality. The revolution was coming, and with it, the scent of things was about to change forever. The year is 1789. The air in Paris is no longer just thick with the familiar scent of powder and perfume. There is a new, sharp smell in the streets, the smell of smoke, of angry sweat, of gunpowder. The delicate, artificial world of the Versailles boudoir, which has been the centre of our story, is about to be shattered. You see the aristocrats, still clinging to their routines. The coiffeur still arrives, his bag of scented tools in hand. The ladies still sit before their mirrors, expecting to be transformed into powdered goddesses. The illusion they are trying to maintain is that life, and their privileged place in it, will continue unchanged. They request the latest parfum, perhaps one that subtly mocks the angry mobs, a parfum la revolt with tiny, broken pitchforks woven in as a joke. They believe their world is invincible. But the shocking reality is that their signature fashion statement, the towering, powdered, scented hairstyle, is about to become a mortal liability. The very thing that for decades has been the ultimate symbol of their status is now a magnet for revolutionary fury. It is a target on their heads. As the revolution gains momentum, the symbolic meaning of the powdered coiffure is inverted overnight. It no longer signifies wealth, leisure, and artistic refinement. It now signifies arrogance, waste, and political corruption. The powder itself, often made from the same flour that the common people need for bread, becomes a lightning rod for class hatred. Pamphlets and cartoons depict Marie Antoinette, Madame Tussaud, with a monstrous hairdo that bankrupts the nation. The cry of "let them eat cake" may be apocryphal, but the sentiment behind it was real, and it was aimed directly at the aristocrats who poured edible flour onto their heads. Suddenly, to walk down the street with a powdered parfum is not to invite admiration, but to invite insults, rocks, and the very real threat of violence. The scent of jasmine and rose powder, once a sign of distinction, now smells like enemy of the people. Women who dare to cling to the old styles are publicly mocked and sometimes attacked. Their elaborate hairstyles are forcibly cut off by angry crowds in a ritual of public humiliation. The coiffeurs themselves are in a perilous position. Their most famous clients are Queen, the Duchess de Polignac, the Princess de Lamballe, now the most hated figures in France. To be known as the Queen's hairdresser, a title that was once the pinnacle of success, is now incredibly dangerous. Leonard Ortai, Marie Antoinette's celebrated coiffeur, who had achieved wealth and fame beyond his wildest dreams, is forced to flee the country. He escapes, disguised, just ahead of the revolutionary tribunals that would have surely sent him to the guillotine. His art, his ambition, his entire world has evaporated. We see a stark and brutal why for this sudden demise. It is the simple, terrifying logic of revolution. When a political order collapses, its symbols are the first things to be torn down. The powdered coiffure was the most visible, most decadent, and most easily understood symbol of the ancient regime's excesses. It represented everything the revolutionaries were fighting against: hereditary privilege, social inequality, and a ruling class completely detached from the reality of the common person's suffering. Attacking the hairstyle was a way of attacking the ideology it represented. The shift in fashion is swift and total. A new aesthetic emerges, one that values simplicity, naturalness, and republican virtue. The ideal is now the Roman Republic, not the Rococo boudoir. Women cut their hair short in styles like the coiffure La Titus or La Brutus, imitating the look of Roman statues. The powder, the pomade, the wire frames, the horsehair pads, they all vanish, seemingly overnight. To wear such a thing is to confess your allegiance to the old, bloody regime. The most chilling hairstyle to emerge is the coiffure La Victime. After the Reign of Terror, women who had lost family members to the guillotine would cut their hair short, leaving the back of the neck exposed, mimicking the way the executioner's assistants would shear the hair of the condemned to ensure a clean cut for the blade. They would sometimes tie a thin red ribbon around their necks, a horrifying and macabre tribute to their dead relatives. The scent of the era is no longer the sweet, cloying powder of the court, but the cold, metallic smell of fear and blood. You watch as a former duchess, now citoyenne, huddles in her sparse apartment. Her hair is short and unpowdered. Her expensive pomade pots and powder puffs are hidden away, useless relics of a dead world. The fragrant, powdered illusion has been violently ripped away, exposing the terrifying new reality. The entire sensory landscape has been upended. The secret history of the Parisian hairdresser, with all its fragrant intrigues and powdered masterpieces, has come to a bloody and abrupt end. The scent of power has changed, and the old perfume will never smell sweet again. The dust of the revolution has settled, and the air of Paris smells different. The sweet, cloying scent of violet and orris root powder no longer hangs in the salons and ballrooms. It has been scrubbed clean by the harsh soap of republicanism. The world seems, on the surface, more honest, more natural. The surviving aristocrats wear simple, unpowdered hair. The age of the great coiffeurs and their powdered mountains is over. This new world presents an illusion of its own, that the artifice, the vanity, the entire secret world built on fragrant lies has been vanquished forever. That humanity has learned its lesson and embraced a simpler, more authentic way of being. But this, too, is an illusion. The ghost of the celebrity coiffeur did not die at the guillotine or flee into permanent exile. His spirit simply waited. It lingered in the background, a faint echo, waiting for the right moment to be reborn. The shocking reality is that he is still with us, more powerful and influential than ever. You have seen him 1,000 times. You see him on the red carpet, hovering just behind a famous actress. He's the celebrity hairstylist, dressed in designer black, holding a can of hairspray instead of a powder puff. You see his name in the credits of a fashion magazine, credited for creating the effortlessly chic look of a supermodel. He is the modern Leonard Ortai. Boudoir is the movie trailer, the backstage dressing room, the private jet. He still holds the secrets of the powerful, listening to whispered confessions as he works his magic. He is still the architect of status. The towering, powdered puff may be gone, but has the artifice truly vanished? Look closer at that natural, beachy wave on the actress. It is no more natural than the pouf, La Belle Poule. It was created over 4 hours with a dozen different heated tools, a cocktail of expensive texturizing sprays and serums are modern, chemically complex pomades, and the sheer volume of it. It's enhanced with 24 inches of ethically sourced human hair extensions, a modern version of the grim hair harvest, often sourced from poor women in distant countries in a transaction not so different from the one that took place in a French village 2 centuries ago. The poisonous lead powder is gone, but we have replaced it with other chemical mysteries, with aerosols and bleaches and dyes that we trust are safe, just as they trusted the ceruse. The scandalous intimacy is still there, but now it's documented on social media, a performance of friendship between star and stylist that builds both their brands. The hairdresser is still a kingmaker, capable of transforming a rising star into an icon or signaling an established one's fall from grace with a bad hair day that goes viral. So why has this spirit, this archetype of the celebrity hairdresser, proven so indestructible? The why is that the fundamental human need that created the 18th century coiffure never went away. The desire to project an image of success, beauty, and power is timeless. The court of Versailles has been replaced by the court of public opinion, a global stage monitored by millions of eyes on screens. In this environment, the need for a perfect, curated image is more intense than ever. We no longer need to signal our status to a few hundred people at a ball. We must signal it to the entire world, instantly. The celebrity stylist is the high priest of this modern religion of the image. They are the ones who understand the subtle codes, who can create the look that says powerful but approachable, artistic but bankable, natural but perfect. They are artists, confidants, and brand strategists. They are still selling the same product Leonard was selling, a beautiful illusion, a fragrant, temporary escape from the messy reality of being human. The ghost of that 18th century world haunts us still. You can't smell its powder anymore, but if you look closely at the glittering world of modern celebrity, you can see the faint, powdered outline of its presence everywhere.